Hello, everyone. I'm Shihoko Goto, Director of the Indo-Pacific Program at the Wilson Center, a think tank chartered by the US Congress based in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us today to discuss maritime security in the Indo-Pacific and challenges facing both the United States and Japan moving forward. To date, the two countries have been at the forefront of championing a free and open Indo-Pacific. And at the meeting between Prime Minister Ishiba and President Trump at the White House earlier this month, the two leaders reaffirmed their shared desire for bilateral security and defense cooperation. And they also reiterated their, quote, strong opposition to the PRC's unlawful maritime claims, militarization of reclaimed features, and threatening and provocative activities in the South China Sea. And they also agreed to oppose Chinese attempts to change the status quo in the East China Sea. And expectations are high that even amid the rapidly shifting realities in the global order, Japan and the United States continue to have shared strategic interests in maritime security and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific. So let's take the next hour to go through what this means and what we can expect in the future. What does a shared vision for maritime security and security writ large between Tokyo and Washington look like? What does the roadmap to implement that vision look like? Not just from a security perspective, but also from a legal perspective and the political as well as actual financial costs to make that vision a reality. I am excited to welcome our speakers today who will guide us through what's at stake, where we are heading, and what to expect. I'd like to introduce them to you alphabetically. First is Yurika Ishii, Associate Professor at the National Defense Academy of Japan, joining us from Tokyo. We also have James Kraska, Chair and Professor of International Maritime Law at the Stockton Center for International Law at the U.S. Naval War College. Also joining us from Tokyo is Yasuhiro Matsuda, Professor of International Politics at the Institute for Advanced Studies on Asia at the University of Tokyo. And finally, James Schoaf, who is Senior Director of the U.S.-Japan Next Alliance Initiative at the Sasaka Peace Foundation, USA. We are, for those who are joining us live today, taking questions live from you. Please submit your questions in the chat box below where you can actually see us speaking today. So with that, let me first turn to Professor Matsuda. Can you please update us on some of Japan's key concerns about geopolitical risks in the Indo-Pacific and how it's shaping Japan's maritime security strategy?
Thank you, Shihoko-san, and thank you very much for having me here in this very interesting webinar conference. Let me briefly discuss the Japan's security concerns, growing security concerns recently. Well, I think that major challenge is coming from China, needless to say. And I think that China's expansionism is all out, and which also includes the military dimension. And although recently China has changed its attitude toward other countries, I think that this is basically a kind of Trump shift, giving a kind of charm offensive to Japan, trying to resume the seafood imports, and also resuming the visa-free visit to China of the Japanese nationals and so on. And some low-key reactions in the sea surrounding, Taiwan. But basically, as a structure, China's expansion is strengthening. And that is prominently emerging in the Taiwan domain, South China Sea, and also East China Sea. In Taiwan domain, I think that there are more and more active actions of the naval vessels, and also coast guards. Coast guards are recently are used to deal with the Taiwan domain by China, and it is understood as a kind of a gray zone tactics to implement the blockade or quarantine. I think that China's maritime resources are used to the Taiwan domain to basically intimidate Taiwanese people, to lead Taiwanese people's mind to you know recede from the United States and try becoming more accommodative to China. I think that this is the first domain, and the second one is South China Sea, and it is a matter of freedom of navigation and also a maritime order issue for the Japanese. And Japan has assisted Southeast Asian countries to build up its maritime capabilities, and that's especially true to the Philippines. And Japan and the Philippines have concluded a rapid access agreement, and also assisted to build the new radar systems in the country, and so on. So basically, Japan is also, feeling a big challenge in the South China Sea and doing the relative, measures to deal with it. And as for Japan, the most important domain is Senkaku Islands. And I think that China has increased the pressure to Japan. For example, by increasing the number of vessels, it used to be 3 vessels. The fleet was 3 vessels. Now it's 4 vessels, and they are all equipped with 30-inch guns. And they used to be unarmed, but now they are all armed. And the frequency of the access to the sea, the sea water near Senkaku has increased a lot, and the ships are becoming very large, so they can stay longer than before. So the Japanese Coast Guard has decided to build very large, ships to compete with China. I think that this is going to be an endless competition, but Japan can stop it because China is doing this operation with a very huge scale. So I think that the threat and challenges coming from China is growing very rapidly. I think that this is a major concern. Other concerns are coming from North Korea and Russia. And North Korean nuclear developments and missile developments are undergoing in a very rapid pace. And we understand that North Korea's target is to have a great deal with the United States, and by stopping the ICBM developments and let the United States admit nuclear North Korea, accept nuclear North Korea. I think that this is their target, and this is quite a negative, a possible deal for both Japan and South Korea. I think that we need more communication and cooperation each other between the United States and Japan in this field. And the final one is Russia. Russia is fighting fiercely in the Western Front, and it has decreased defense assets in the Far East. But still, Russia and China have cooperated each other, and Russo-Chinese joint operations are increasing, even in South China Sea. So I think that there are some people who are insisting that we can drive a wedge between China and Russia, but I don't think so. I don't think it is plausible. Basically, the connections are getting deeper and deeper. The situation is quite different from what we had seen in the 1970s. At that time, Russia and the Soviet Union and China were in a very bad situation. They had a very bad relationship. That's why US could drive a wedge between those two countries. Now they are deeply connected in various fields. So if you really want to drive a wedge between two countries and try to accommodate Russia, I think that President Putin will just pocket it in and keep a cooperation with China. So I think that these three traditional threats or challenges, security challenges, are the challenges that Japan are facing. And this is unprecedented, security situation for Japan. We need more cooperation, and Japan itself has to strengthen its defense capability, but we need more communications and cooperation. Let me stop here.
Professor Matsuda, thank you very much for that really great overview. You talk about this endless challenge that Japan is facing, and also the unprecedented situation that Japan is facing as well. Your focus on not just the challenge that's coming from China, but the growing relations between China and Russia and the constraints that Japan has as a result of it. The focus for Japan, not just on Chinese ambitions for Taiwan, but also in the South China Sea, and of course for Japan itself, the ambitions for the Senkaku Islands. These are all very good reminders of what Japan's interests are and where there is opportunity for US-Japan cooperation and coordination. So with that, if I can turn now to you, Jim, again, a lot has transpired since February 7th, even though it's just simply a few weeks ago. Can you shed light on how the latest significant shifts in the direction of US foreign policy is impacting or can impact US relations with Japan? And how that may or may not impact US-Japan efforts to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chihoko. It's great to be with you. And let me build upon Matsuda Sensei's introduction or overview and talk a little bit about what Japan is doing as a result, and then what the US-Japan alliance is doing, and where I think how Washington is perceiving things right now, at least as far as we can tell. So in late 2022, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Japan revamped its national security strategy. And this word unprecedented showed up in the strategy for the first time, calling China an unprecedented strategic challenge. And it outlined an ambitious plan to strengthen defense capabilities, number one, by its own efforts, number two, in the context of the US-Japan alliance, and number three, working more closely with like-minded countries. And this came with real money behind it. Japan is boosting its defense spending, what they call the Defense Buildup Plan, up to about 2% of GDP. So this was 6.8 trillion yen in 2023, 7.95 trillion yen for the defense budget in 2024, and 8.7 trillion recently approved, roughly, going forward. Now, the weaker yen has eaten into the buying power of that. In dollar terms, it's not quite as dramatic, but it's still a lot of resources to be applied. Where is that going? They're expanding capabilities on their own in outer space, uh, cyberspace, long range, counterstrike, or standoff attack capability. This is mostly all in the context of defense, but purchasing Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles from the United States and other types of longer range missiles, ship launched, air launched, etc. Unmanned systems, a new command and control system, a new JADG, what they call JADG system, and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance investments for missile defense, and trying to revive or build up the defense industrial base in Japan. They will be introducing their first joint operational command, the JJOC, Japan Joint Operational Command, in just a few weeks. This is, I think, an important development. It doesn't add resources to the self-defense forces, but it brings together a joint command, which many have been calling for ever since the great earthquake, tsunami, nuclear disaster, and realizing the challenges on that front. With the United States, then one key piece is, can we take advantage of this opportunity of Japan developing the JJOC and build a counterpart command in Japan to be a counterpart for the JJOC. So we have U.S. forces in Japan. We have about 55,000 or so U.S. Military personnel and an incredible array of defense assets. All of those assets answer back to the component commands and Indo-PACOM in Hawaii. We don't have any command authority actually in Japan to be a partner with the JJOC. So at the 2+2 last year, the U.S. pledged with Japan to develop a counterpart. We will see the plans for this evolving over time, but we don't know yet how significant, how large, or how much authority this new U.S. forces Japan will have, or what they call a joint force headquarters. But I think that will be a real upgrade in the ability of the alliance to carry out certain bilateral missions. Probably not so much the use of force, although there will be some U.S. collaboration, probably in Japan's counterstrike capability for targeting and assessment. But a lot of this is just mundane transportation, logistics, intelligence and surveillance, maritime security, cyber defense, other types of bilateral missions on that front. We have other U.S. investments that have been going into the region, a new marine company in Okinawa to boost capabilities, a watercraft transport company in Yokohama, etc. So that's on the U.S.-Japan side. And then with partners, as Matsuda-san alluded to, Japan has been increasing security cooperation bilaterally and trilaterally with the United States, with South Korea, with Australia, with the Philippines, and most recently we had a carriers and a naval exercise of the U.S., Japan, and France, for example. So it's all part of this effort to pool resources and demonstrate shared interest in preserving this free and open Indo-Pacific, and dissuade or discourage China particularly, but other countries as well, from Russia, North Korea, from thinking they can gain something from using force or coercion to change the status quo. We had Sasakawa USA invited last week some retired Japanese self-defense force officers who were leading a review study group of the national security strategy. General Oriki, who had been the chief of the Joint Staff, along with retired Lieutenant General Isobe and Lieutenant General Araki, and they were presenting the results of their kind of third round of recommendations of the national security strategy for Japan going forward. They really wanted to see an acceleration of this JJOC kind of Joint Force Headquarters connection. They think Oriki had been the chief of the Joint Staff during Operation Tomodachi back in 2011, and I think he understood the potential benefit on that front. a higher profile for nuclear deterrence planning, kind of putting the extended deterrence dialogue into the alliance coordination mechanism was one of their recommendations. So this concern about China's growing and North Korea's growing nuclear capability, forming kind of multipolarity in a nuclear context is something we're working on. And building a partner coordination center within the JJOC to work with other partners, not just the United States, Australia, perhaps others as well, was one of their recommendations. So we have a kind of a bold agenda for both within Japan and within the alliance. The real key now is what's going to happen with the Trump administration in terms of funding for the Defense Department, kind of a commitment or a forward lean in Asia, working with security partners. I think a lot of the rank and file folks and some of the leaders that have been picked by Trump to lead various departments or agencies are interested in working with Japan. They see Japan as a key partner in this effort to preserve stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. But we don't know yet what the view from the top really is on this front and what are the implications of, essentially what looks like a little bit of abandonment of Ukraine, and what impact that could have on the Asia Pacific. So I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Jim. That was a really great kind of overview of what's going on and the efforts, coordinated efforts to deter China. I'd like to go back once we've done our first round on your issue about the spending side, as well as partners for Japan and the United States within the Indo-Pacific region as well. But before I do that, I would like to turn to Professor Ishii to address some of the key challenges for Japan and the United States, and how the rule of law, especially the international law, can be best used to resolve some of the ongoing maritime disputes and preempt military conflict in the first place. So over to you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for having me in this very important seminar. I'm specialized in international law, so let me briefly provide the framework of international law that governs the situation, and then answer to your questions. And I do have a slide to share with you. Okay, so here, when we talk about international law, we are talking about some of the treaties, including the Charter of the United Nations, which provides prohibition of the use of force and peaceful settlement of disputes, as well as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the constitution of the ocean. We also have general principles such as obligation to cooperate or self-restraint, but let me focus on the UNCLOS here, because we are now facing challenges that China poses to Japan and other countries in the region. So the UNCLOS provides the basic framework of the law of the sea, and it provides that the coastal states cannot claim security interests beyond the national territory. However, what China is doing is exactly, claiming the security interests beyond its national territory. So I think most of the audience are familiar with the claim of 9 dash lines that China claimed in South China Sea, and also a declaration of maritime features in the region. And I also assume that most of the audience are familiar with the fact that the Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal in 2016 explicitly rejected China's claim on 9 dash line and stated that the UNCLOS governs the maritime titles in the region. Now, after the arbitral award was issued, China not necessarily changed its claim, but it also started to explicitly claim the concept of mid-ocean archipelagic quota. The concept of the mid-ocean archipelagic water means that China has the sovereignty within the waters of the archipelagic line that you can see here. The line surrounding Spratly Islands and other group of islands. Now, the concept of mid-ocean archipelagic water is contrary to the rules of the UNCLOS, as Annex 7 Arbitral Tribunal stated that only the UNCLOS governs the maritime title, the claim over the waters within the archipelagic line that you can see here is not valid under international law. So besides South China Sea, China is also making claims in the East China Sea, and here, Japan is directly involved in the claim. So as you may know, China is claiming its sovereignty over the Senkaku Islands. For those who are not familiar with the history of this island, Japan incorporated these maritime features into its national territory in 1895 after it resolved that it is terra nullius, that no other states are claiming the territorial title over the islands. Now, China started to claim its territorial title in 1971, and thereafter it keeps publishing many historical documents, and also it has been sending ships in the contiguous zones and territorial seas surrounding the islands. Now, so I will talk more about the situation in Senkaku Islands because it relates to the green zone operations that China is employing. But besides Senkaku Islands, we also have other disputes concerning the development of undelimited continental shelf between Japan and China. Now you're looking at the geographical equidistance line in here, and China is unilaterally, developing the oil rigs in the continental shelf. Now, although it is the Chinese side of the equidistance line, it is a part of Japanese potential continental shelf, and therefore, Japan is claiming that China should halt the unilateral development of the oil rigs and comply with the agreements that two countries have previously made in 2008. Okay, so this is the one of the structures that China is developing in the East China Sea. Now, what is difficult is that the fact that China is employing so-called gray zone tactics here. So though they are not necessarily violation of international law, however, as you know, these practices are taking place, it incrementally threats the national security of the region. So examples include military exercise out of the territorial sea, and this is particularly relevant in Taiwan situation. China has conducted the military drills, as you can see in the map, and it clearly sends some messages to Taiwan. Now, this picture shows Chinese Coast Guard vessels in the maritime area surrounding Senkaku Islands, and the red boxes shows that Chinese government ship, actually got into the territorial sea of the Senkaku Islands. Now, the entrance into the territorial sea, it's not necessarily the violation of the sovereignty. However, the Japanese government in 2021 explicitly mentioned that it is violation of the sovereignty of Japan, since these Chinese Coast Guard vessels claim that Senkaku Islands are part of China. Also today, it is reported that Japanese Coast Guard finally changed the expression so that it explicitly recognized that these vessels are armed. Previously, the government just mentioned that it carries the materials that looks like arms, but they finally changed the expression to show that the situation is urgent. So looking at these gray zone operations, the difficulty is that it does not trigger the red line. So it does not cross the red line immediately. However, as the practice goes on, it poses some threats to national security. So first coming back to the first point, I would like to reiterate that the countries should comply with the established international law. I think it is the fundamental framework that governs the international relations, and the use of force, the prohibition of the use of force, as well as the obligation for the peaceful settlement of disputes are the basic norm that I think that the countries should comply with so that it could avoid the military confrontation. Now, of course, it comes with the national powers, including the deterrence. However, I would like to highlight that the norms also plays the effective role in the international relations. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Professor Ishii, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of adhering to the rule of law and China's pushing the boundaries of the law and its gray zone tactics. And this really tees up very nicely to my question to Professor Kraska about U.S. strategic interest in promoting the rule of law in the Indo-Pacific, both in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, and how they can work together to counter Chinese aggressions whilst advancing the rule of law. But before I turn to him, if I can remind our viewers that we are taking questions from you, please put them in the chat box. We've had a few already, but it would be great to hear from you. So with that, Professor Kraska.
Thank you kindly, Goto-san, and also to the Wilson Center for the kind invitation and for the wonderful colleagues that I get to hear. I appreciate everything that's been said. These are my personal views, even though I'm at the U.S. Naval War College. And what I'd like to do is relate the importance of international law that Professor Ishii mentioned to the strategic goals that we all share, which is to contain communist China. So I think that with the new administration, we have a more effective plan to actually do that. My view is that the European NATO states with 3 or more times the population of the Russian Federation and 8 or 10 times the economic power of the Russian Federation, also with 2 independent nuclear powers, France and the United Kingdom, that they are going to have to do more. The reason why is because, not that we don't like them, but just because with both Russia and China as a major authoritarian challenge, in addition to Iran and North Korea, the United States cannot do it all and risks being in a position of the United Kingdom in 1945, or as Paul Kennedy wrote 40 years ago, a position of imperial overstretch. And so NATO, European NATO is going to have to, they're going to have to protect Europe so that the United States can work with the linchpin of security in East Asia, and that's Japan. I think that the U.S. is already doing this. Remember that the administration has fenced off and protected foreign military aid to only two entities. That's the Philippines and Taiwan. And there's three proposals that I'd like to put on the table that are international law tools or levers that can actually strengthen the position of the democracies, the like-minded states in East Asia. The first is recognizing that Japan is the essential security partner. It's not a treaty partner. It is the linchpin for security for half of the world. It is as important as all of NATO. And Japan running through the first island chain, my view is that the United States ought to conduct operations with the Japan Coast Guard around the Senkaku Islands with the U.S. Coast Guard. So China, as we've heard from Matsunada-san, has 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessel task force around the Senkaku Islands. They have 35 or 40 millimeter and even 76 millimeter weapons. The Japan Coast Guard has 3 to 5 vessels, usually from Ishigaki or Kagoshima, as well as the Japan Coast Guard base in Fukuoka and Kyushu. And these ought to be supplemented by first U.S. Coast Guard and perhaps other countries, Philippines, Australia. The other thing is that Senkaku Islands is Japanese territory. The United States recognized it and indeed exercised administrative control over it when it occupied Okinawa after World War II. Indeed, we used Kuba Island and Taisho Island as a bombing range until 1977. It was only stopped, the U.S. Navy wanted to continue, and it was President Jimmy Carter that refused to continue to do that. And this was part of the geopolitics of trying to bring China into the community of nations. We know that that project has been very disappointing because the stronger China has gotten, the worse it has behaved. And so my view is that the United States should return to its position of the 1970s and recognize the Senkaku Islands are indeed part of Japan. The other thing that the United States can do to use law to strengthen the first island chain is to begin to discuss more with partners and within the United States about legal theories for the defense of Taiwan. So there are 2 that come to mind. The first is that there's nothing there's nothing that says that Taiwan cannot be recognized as an independent state. Indeed, there are countries that recognize Taiwan as a state, and therefore, if it's attacked, other countries may aid it in collective self-defense. This is simply a policy choice, and it bears considering whether the policy choice has outlived its usefulness. The second is more subtle, and that is that any mainland Communist Chinese attack on Taiwan constitutes a threat to international peace and security under Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter, and it's also under the Japan Constitution. It's a situation or a Japan threatening situation, and therefore there is rationale or legal rationale for the United States and Japan to come to the aid of Taiwan. And then the third thing I will end with is that we ought to rethink this concept that Professor Ishii mentioned of the gray zone. The gray zone is largely a creation of 2 decisions by the International Court of Justice. The first is the paramilitary activities case between the United States and Nicaragua. The United States lost that case, but the decision has been incredibly damaging to democracies. That 1986 case said that the United States could not aid its allies, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, against Nicaraguan aggression, low-level insurgency aggression, so-called gray zone type attacks, terrorism and the rest, because the aggression lacked the gravity or the scale and effect of a conventional attack, and therefore there was no collective right of self-defense. It was a completely wrong-headed decision, but nonetheless, it's entered into international law. The second decision reinforces that, and that's the oil platforms decision of 2003 between Iran and the United States. And this was a similar decision where the International Court of Justice during Operation Praying Mantis in the 1980s, when the United States struck Iranian oil platforms and Iranian naval units and Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps units that were conducting a low-level maritime insurgency against the United States and international shipping in the Gulf. And the ICJ said that the U.S. was not entitled to self-defense because even if these numerous Iranian attacks were threatening, they also did not rise to this scale and effect or this gravity of a conventional attack. And so that's where we are. We have this judicially created artificial theory in international law. The United States has a different approach. It's never accepted these positions. And I would encourage other states to think about this approach. Under the U.S. approach and the standing rules of engagement, states may act in self-defense in the face of a hostile act or even just a demonstration of hostile intent, such as use of fire control radar, underwater sonar against divers, as Australia has experienced. It doesn't mean that in all cases that those commanding officers, of course, would use force, but rather it puts aggressors on notice that there is a legal understanding that force can be used to repel force, and that there's not this gray zone area. So with that, I'll conclude and look forward to discussion. Thank you.
James, thank you so much. You've laid a lot on the table. We have a lot to work with some of the thought-provoking ideas you laid out. Perhaps I can now turn to one of the questions that we have from the audience, which puts it very, very short and succinctly, from Dr. Robert Friedman, Johns Hopkins University, who asks, does Japan now think it can count on Trump for security assistance? I'd like to elaborate on that and perhaps discuss. There are in some quarters in the United States, expectations for Japan to bolster its defense spending to the tune of 3%. There is certainly, whether that numerical target is reached or not, there is certainly a clamoring on the part of the Trump administration to see Japan engage more. At the same time, there is greater appetite on the part of Japan, not only to be more actively involved, but also work more closely with countries like established treaty allies of the United States, such as the Philippines. I would like to ask Professor Matsuda first, and perhaps Jim next, about some of the opportunities, limitations that Japan has in meeting the needs and wants of this new kind of security landscape. What are possible in terms of the political appetite, the economic capabilities, and then also, the actual technological capabilities as well? So over to you, Professor Matsuda, first.
Thank you for the question. That's a very tough question, but some people say that Japan needs to amend its constitution in order to strengthen its defense capability. I think that this is yes and no. There might be a better approach under the new amended constitution, but under the current constitution, Japan can do a lot because Japan's defense posture is still Cold War type, and also still more focusing on the threats coming from the north. So if you check out the air bases, in the southern part of Japan, they're almost naked. There are no, bankers and so on. So I think that there are lots of things to do, for the sake of strengthening the base resiliency, counterattack capabilities, and cyber security. A lot of things we can do alone. And also, I mean that by Japan's efforts, and also with the cooperation with the United States and like-minded countries. So self-defense forces used to be very strong in peacetime, but it should be also very strong in the wartime. So no, so that's our target, and we have a lot of things to do. Yeah.
If you want me to jump in on that, I mean, to get to the professor's question, I think the short answer, can Japan count on security support from Trump? I think the short answer is yes. But the longer answer is more complicated because I do see the European theater and the Asian theater as connected, and even if Europe takes on a larger role for defense and deterrence in Europe, if we end up rewarding Russian aggression in Ukraine, I think that will be significantly damaging to the security atmosphere and environment in Asia. It will become questionable in terms of how far the Trump administration will go to intervene or push back on more aggressive Chinese tactics, or maybe even by North Korea. Of course, I agree with Professor Kraska that the U.S. sees Japan as a very indispensable and important partner. It does prioritize security in Asia, but realizing that even though Japan is putting more effort into its defense capabilities and command and control capabilities, how aggressively will we empower this new USFJ in Japan? To what extent will we be able to carry through the decision making and more integrated or more interoperable forces? Still a lot of challenges in terms of political leadership, getting that through, and money, etc. So, I think it's going to take a lot of work and effort to continue making the case that this alliance, together with partners in the region, is extremely valuable for deterrence, for stability, for prosperity, for everybody. Hopefully, China gets that message as well. But I'm concerned about what's going on in Europe and the impact that will have on Asia.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I couldn't agree more. But if I can turn back to one of the thought-provoking topics that James raised, one was about the stepping up a legal defense of Taiwan. That's a separate issue unto itself. But I wanted to turn that and perhaps ask about the legal defense of Senkaku, which is very much in the site of the PRC. If I can turn to Professor Ishii about some of the ways that the United States could promote the Japan's ownership of the Senkaku Islands, and how we can use the international law to make that case moving forward.
Thank you for the question. Now, let me start with the confirmation that the United States and Japan, repeatedly agreed that Article 5 of the U.S.-Japan Security Agreement applies. That means if applies with regard to Senkaku Islands. That means that if Senkaku Islands is somehow occupied or taken by the other country, that would trigger the U.S.-Japan agreement. Having said that, the best way is that such a situation, the best way, the best course is to avoid such a situation from happening, because if China somehow tries to take Senkaku Islands, it will certainly employ the gray zone tactics. So it is unconceivable that China sends military first. It wouldn't happen. The possible scenario is that they will send civilians first, and then possibly the Coast Guard vessels, so that it would not cross the border that would trigger the exercise of self-defense, the right of self-defense. As Professor Kraska mentioned, there's the established jurisprudence of international law that if a country tries to exercise the right of self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, that would require require that an armed attack occurs, and that requires the higher threshold than the use of force. And Japan, as the national policy, takes the interpretation that would it will require the certain gravity of the use of force before it exercises the right of self-defense. So that means that in order to legally defend the Senkaku Islands, first I think it is important that countries peacefully settle the disputes and or the differences of the views, since Japan is still holding its view that there is no disputes regarding the Senkaku Islands. So, and also it is also important to deter the other countries from trying to take the islands, both in terms of law and also in terms of national strategy. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one or two more questions. I'd like to turn to a question from Hiroaki Nakanishi, who asks in part about power projection capabilities of Japan by using its limited resources and expanding its relationships with neighboring countries, including the Republic of Korea, as well as Australia and the Philippines and the like. So the question I would, if I can elaborate, Nakanishi-san's question would be about Japan. Yes, it is at the forefront of promoting and preserving the status quo in the region. It is the staunchest U.S. ally and partner in the region as well, but it cannot do so alone. There are established treaties, but also we are seeing new frameworks or frameworks that can be expanded. I'm thinking in particular about the Quad. What are some of the ways that Japan can kind of expand and be more creative about partnering with like-minded, and I don't want to say like-minded because I think the motivating factor will be about countries that have similar strategic interests in the region. So why don't I ask Jim that first, and then perhaps turn to either James or Professor Matsuda.
Okay. Thanks. I'll try to be real quick. I mean, I do. Clearly, we're already seeing this trend of trying to use primarily the trilateral, so leveraging the U.S. alliance as a vehicle to then engage. I think most of my friends in Japan, when they talk about doing these types of things, they just feel like they can get in at a much higher, more sophisticated level with a partner if they start by doing it with the United States rather than just building up their own bilateral connections and habits with that country. So it raises the entry point. It complicates things. It brings things down to a little bit more of a basic level, except I would say, on very key utilitarian, useful things like missile defense cooperation among U.S., Japan, South Korea. That has real practical value, and they're really ramping up, I think, in terms of information exchange and integration. Certain maritime security interests and cooperations. I think on the defense industrial side, they're pushing it, in terms of the fighter program with the UK and Italy, and now maybe a amphibious landing craft project with the UK. So on defense industrial, on certain key capabilities that we've also seen in terms of monitoring North Korean sanctions enforcement and maritime security. That's involved a lot of different partners on the Blue Ridge based out of Japan. So there are opportunities there, but that won't be substitute necessarily for the U.S.-Japan alliance yet.
Great, thank you. Would anyone like to add to that?
Goto-san, I could add just that, my view is that the high-end fight is the most important, and that everything else is a lesser included subset. And therefore, I would focus there's nothing wrong with the Quad, but I would focus foremost on the major issues, the defense of Japan, all of Japan, as well as Taiwan, which I actually think, if it's taken by force, is a mortal threat to Japan as well as the United States. That would put China into the Ogasawara Islands, the Bonin Islands. The United States shares a border, a maritime boundary with Japan. There's hundreds of years of rare earth minerals on the seabed, on the continental shelf that Japan has. And so I think focusing on things like that, things such as considering bringing Japan into the phase 2 of AUKUS, the high end, then stabilizes the relationships. Typhoon missiles in the Philippines, these all stabilize the security architecture and allow for strategic partners like India or Vietnam, Malaysia, to then gives them a safe space to deepen cooperation.
Thank you. We've covered a lot of ground, and there are many questions that came in, and I'm so sorry that we didn't get to go to all of them. But we've literally only touched the tip of the iceberg. One of the questions was about Arctic cooperation as well. But anyway, the time has come for me to wrap up this conversation. I want to thank all of our speakers today. Professor Matsuda, Professor Ishii, Professor Kraska, Jim Schoaf. Thank you so much for being here. I want to also thank my colleagues, Keen McBride, Brian Prevost, who actually make sure that these events happen. Thank you also to Keisuke Wada, our amazing intern, and my colleague, Lucas Myers, who are also helping behind the scenes to make this happen as well. So with that, we will continue this conversation. Again, the situation is rapidly evolving, if not by the day, certainly by the week. So hopefully we can get together again soon. So until then, thank you and goodbye.